CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. No new coal mines or power stations abroad and more vaccine donations. China's president speaks at the United Nations General Assembly.
Our other headlines, Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson talks up the chances of a trade deal with the United States, but President Biden plays down the chances of any agreement.
Europe's spiralling gas bill. Now EU ministers meet in Slovenia to discuss the energy crisis.
And a senior aide to the Ukrainian president comes under fire in an apparent failed assassination attempt. China says it'll stop investing and building new coal-fired power stations abroad. That was the message from China's President Xi Jinping, who spoke on the first day of the United Nations General Assembly.
He also said Beijing would step up support for low-carbon energy. President Xi also told the gathering that China has never and will never invade or bully others and pledged more COVID-19 vaccine donations.
In addition to donating $100 million to COVAX, China will donate 100 million vaccine doses to other developing countries in the course of this year. China will continue to support and participate in origin tracing that is based on science and stands firmly opposed to political manoeuvring on this subject in any form.
Also on the sidelines of the UN's General Assembly meeting, Joe Biden is hosting a vaccination summit, the largest gathering of heads of state to discuss the pandemic so far. Well, our correspondent John Terrett is in New York. So, John, sum up the UN's meeting so far for us.
Well, I think let's concentrate on day one, because it was pretty extraordinary, I think, that they had the two leaders that we most of all want to hear from in the first day, Joe Biden and President Xi of China, the heads of the two biggest economies in the world. And it was a virtual appearance by President Xi, which I thought worked really well. It's good because you can have a nice camera shot and picture of yourself. You're up on the big screens, the podium is in the middle, everybody can see you and hear you very clearly. And of course, it's carbon efficient. That's another thing that's worth bearing in mind, I think. His tone was relatively sort of, global, I would say, really. He talked about how the world is in a new period of turbulence and transformation. He said we're at a crossroads at the moment, and we must harness that or fall back into a zero-sum game of Cold War mentality. He talked about a form of governance in the future that is based on multilateralism, on the people, on a central approach. Of course, there was that coal fire announcement that we'll be dealing with later in the programme, which got a lot of interest here at the General Assembly. The whole tone really was about mutual respect, win-win, typical China positional speech, I think. He also, as you said at the top, Robin, called for more COVID-19 vaccines to be distributed, said that China will do that. He said the pandemic is about science and not politics. And I thought it interesting that he rejected the notion, when you hear it all the time, oh, China's going to invade, China's going to do this, that, the other, particularly regarding Taiwan. He said there, as you said at the top there, that China will never go to war or seek hegemony, and he suggested that other countries take the same attitude. As for President Biden, well, it was a very similar tone, in my view. He talked about America trying to cure the ails in the world and saying that we will always lead, but we won't go it alone. He was in a sort of introspective mood. He talked about the world being at an inflection point, and he said that we're not seeking to start a Cold War, and everybody knew he was talking about China when he said that. And indeed, President Xi said something pretty similar in his speech later in the day. There was more money as well for hunger and for developing nations and for COVID-19 as well. But the analysis here, I have to leave you with this thought on this subject. The analysis here is that these were very fine words, very similar to what President Obama used to say. And there's a long way between fine words and actually getting things done. Robin?
And John, Joe Biden has also been speaking on the sidelines of the Assembly, hasn't he? What's he been saying?
Yes, well, this is going on right now. It's funny because we did have the two big leaders yesterday, and we had Iran yesterday as well. And in a sense, the air has gone out of the balloon a little bit here. But that doesn't mean that there's not still an awful lot going on. There is, because right now there is a virtual, I mean, they call it a summit, but it's a meeting involving all sorts of NGOs and diplomats and interested parties on the issue of COVID-19 and its many variants. What I don't think many of us realized until today was that it's actually behind closed doors. It's not open to the press because I think they want to get on with some pretty tough talking. Joe Biden yesterday when he spoke here talked about an exciting opportunity. And, of course, the Secretary General, in that extraordinary speech yesterday in which he talked about the world being on the edge of an abyss, pointed out the real vaccine discrimination that there is in the world, with something like 99% of all Africans have had no vaccine whatsoever. And within the past few minutes, there was a little bit of the meeting that was open, and for that portion, we heard from Joe Biden, who is apparently now delivering 500 million more vaccines to low and middle income countries around the world. He hopes to get that done by about 2022. I think I heard him say that. And that will bring to 1.1 billion the number of vaccines the US has donated so far. Finally, and very quickly, there are other things taking place here today. The permanent 5 members of the Security Council, the foreign ministers, are meeting on Afghanistan. So too the G20. They're trying to come up with a policy on that country and how to deal with its new leaders, the Taliban. Robin and Owen, Jamie.
John, good to talk to you. John Terrett there in New York.
Well, as we've been hearing, China's President Xi Jinping is promising to halt new coal mines abroad and says he'll increase financial support for green projects in developing countries. Professor Rana Mitter is Professor of History at Oxford University, where he's Director of the China Centre. I asked him about the significance of this speech.
This is a very significant development, and it's necessary to point out that actually China deciding that it will not be funding coal-fired, fossil fuel-driven energy outside China itself is a major step. A great many of the countries, which of course are also looking to increase economic growth in the global south, from Bangladesh to many of the countries of sub-Saharan Africa, of course need energy. But since China's become such a major investor and supplier of energy, the pledge that it will be done through green sources is a very, very important move. So this is definitely a positive. It's definitely a plus.
Fighting the pandemic, obviously a hot topic at this year's event, and President Xi's pledged 2 billion vaccine doses to the world by the end of the year. I mean, this is another substantial announcement, isn't it?
The vaccine rollout, which is going on globally, is now one in which China is heavily involved. It's worth noting that there are two main sources, you might say, of making sure that the rollout is genuinely global. COVAX, which is an international effort which is driven by a whole variety of countries, many, but not all, in the global north, you might say, the Western world. And of course, China, which has also been developing its own vaccines. What's interesting is that in some countries, you see a bit of a mix and match. People are actually taking some elements of the vaccines, some doses from the COVAX Western-dominated brands and some from the Chinese. And that's a sign that actually bringing a combination, bringing a hybrid of treatments, of capacity that we have around the world with the vaccine is going to be part of making sure it really does go global. In other words, we can't do it without everyone pitching in a hand.
I want to talk to you about the submarine deal between the United States, the UK and Australia, AUKUS, aimed at although it's not said, but challenging China essentially. I wonder what kind of dynamic that creates at the United Nations General Assembly.
It's notable that actually the United Nations General Assembly speeches that have been going out so far, we've had President Biden, President Xi, a whole variety of quite important leaders, have actually genuinely been quite emollient in some ways. There seems to be an effort to talk more on all sides about where there's a possibility for coordination and cooperation. So President Biden has been talking about the need to move to much more diplomacy, away from conflict. And I think that Xi Jinping, President Xi, has been talking a great deal about where the world can find areas that it can agree on. Now, you pointed out that there is this new AUKUS deal. I think that one of the things that's important about AUKUS, it stands for Australia, UK, United States, and it has to do essentially with the deployment of nuclear-powered but not nuclear-armed submarines in the Western Pacific region, is that it's much more about both sides. I think there are two sides, that's fair, actually working out how they want to arrange themselves in the new order. So in a sense, it's important that a European actor, although a non-EU one, is working with a Pacific actor and an Atlantic actor to come together. And it also, I think, prompts China to think about the way in which it too needs to seek partnerships and alliances in the region.
You talk about the spirit of partnership. You're a seasoned watcher of these kind of events. Let's look at the two presidents' speeches. I mean, do you sense an effort by the two leaders to calm what are heightened tensions?
I think that there is a huge effort going on both in Washington and Beijing to try and provide some element of calm and of cooperation to some of the important issues that are going on. COP26, the major, in some ways, really very crucial climate change conference, will be taking place in the UK at Glasgow in just a few weeks' time. And one of the big questions is, first of all, everyone in the world, I think, is hoping that actually President Xi Jinping will be turning up in person in Glasgow to really make it clear that China is fully involved with this agenda. If he and President Biden were to meet there, that would be a really very important development. And it would also symbolize that actually the two major military powers in the world, the United States and China, can also talk to each other across the diplomatic table on issues where everyone has a stake.
The UK is considering trying to join an existing trade deal between the United States, Mexico and Canada after hopes of a bilateral agreement with the United States faded. This comes as Prime Minister Boris Johnson met President Joe Biden in the White House. Britain has been pushing for trade deals after Brexit and leaving the EU's single market. Well, our correspondent Andrew Wilson has been following the story for us. Andrew, just how likely is it that the UK could get itself included in this trade deal?
Oh, Jamie, it's no secret that ever since Brexit took place, the Brexiteers have been pitching a deal with the United States, a trade deal with the United States, as being a jewel in the crown of a post-Brexit economic world, something to be aimed for and something to achieve by the time Boris Johnson comes up for re-election in 2024. He indeed said in 2017, in his own words, we will be first in line to do a trade deal with the United States. Well, it's proven that the United States is less excited about the prospect of a trade deal, not necessarily because it doesn't want to, but because it's got other things to deal with. It's a very busy country at the moment. So some comments from Boris Johnson's retinue travelling with him in Washington suggest that they'll be looking at other options. One of those is to pick off particular special sectors. The Prime Minister today mentioned beef, he mentioned whiskey, he mentioned lamb as well. Particular sectors they might just do mini deals on. It's thought the White House isn't beyond considering that. But the other prize they're looking at is joining this tripartite deal between Mexico, Canada and the United States, which was known as NAFTA before Donald Trump renamed it last year when he effected a slight renegotiation of the terms. It's a very cosy neighbourhood deal. It's not one that lends itself necessarily to countries coming in from outside, and there's no real application process that a country can get involved in, not like the Trans-Pacific deal, which the UK is also trying to get involved in. So it seems to be something of an outside chance, and what makes it difficult for the Prime Minister that the newspapers are talking in terms of Boris Johnson pinning his hopes on joining this deal with the United States. In other words, it looks as if, from one perspective at least, that the UK is starting to run out of options. That's not necessarily true. Boris Johnson is still optimistic, but nonetheless, it is being said in certain quarters now that perhaps the UK is finding it harder to deal with the US than it first thought it might. OK, well, that's the UK perspective, perhaps. So where do the Americans stand on this? Well, the Americans aren't altogether against a trade deal. It's not written off by any means, and it may indeed turn out that the UK can boost its GDP one day by joining this tripartite deal across the North American continents. But Joe Biden's got an awful lot on his plate, and none of those are concerning deals with the UK in terms of trade. He's got China to think about. He's got the strategic defence review with the submarine deal that you've just been talking about with your previous guest. He's got issues about infrastructure that badly need dealing with, and of course COP26 comes coming up, where the US is starting to take a lead there financially and will be expected to take a lead as well in terms of the politics of the event when it takes place. When it does come to the UK and its politics, it's worth mentioning that high on the White House agenda are concerns about the Northern Ireland Protocol and how that might have been dented or damaged or even endangered by the Brexit and the change of rules surrounding customs unions and so on there. Now, Joe Biden's not happy that Northern Ireland is, if you like, under threat from an American perspective, nor is Nancy Pelosi, who was the senior Democrat who was over in the UK last week as well. So these will be concerns, and Joe Biden's made it clear he's going to want reassurance from Boris Johnson's government that before he starts talking about any other kind of issues concerning the UK economy, he wants to make sure there's not going to be any unpleasant fallout and collateral damage concerning all the people of Northern Ireland who have all those strong connections, of course, with the United States.
Andrew Wilson, thank you very much.
The fallout from Australia's submarine deal with France may now complicate Canberra's negotiations on a free trade deal with the European Union. It comes after Prime Minister Scott Morrison cancelled an order for French-built submarines originally agreed in 2016 in favour of a new defence pact with the United States and UK announced last week. Greg Navarro is in Sydney.
This will be a very tricky week for Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who has to navigate between furthering the security alliance with the United States and trying to repair damage by the announcement that Australia was scrapping a deal with the French company to build a fleet of submarines. Now, in fact, Morrison addressed the latter, saying that you would have to be naive. This is when he first arrived in the United States on Monday. You'd have to be naive not to expect France to react angrily to all of this. He's referring to an announcement earlier this month that Australia was in fact pulling out of a 90 billion Australian dollar deal with a French company to build a fleet of attack-class submarines, instead opting to go with a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines, relying on technology that was being lent from the United States. Now, pulling out of that French deal has apparently cost Australia about 2 billion Australian dollars. That's money Australia will not get back. It has also put a free trade agreement that Australia was trying to hammer out with the European Union in jeopardy. Remember that France plays a significant role, has significant influence in the European Union when it comes to trade issues. There are also concerns here in Australia that the move will further incur more economic sanctions from China. Indonesia also not happy with this move. It's expressed concern, saying that it could very well inflame tensions within the region. Now, Morrison will finish up his U.S. trip at the end of the week by meeting with Quad leaders. They'll do this for the first time face-to-face. That's the leaders from India, Australia, Japan, and the United States. They're scheduled to talk about a variety of topics, including regional security. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, an assassination attempt on a top aide to the Ukrainian president. He promises a strong response.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
I'm Ryan Thompson in Frankfurt. With elections on the horizon, Europe's largest economy is preparing for a shakeup.
I'm Natalie Carney in Munich, and I'll be asking voters how immigration and the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic will affect their decisions when they head to the polls.
And I'm Trent Murray in Berlin as Germany prepares to elect a new government and usher in a new post-Merkel era.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just a reminder for you that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Two more energy companies in the UK have gone bust, and British regulators are warning there could be more to follow. Ofgem says that energy bills will almost certainly rise as customers are moved to new providers on less competitive fixed tariff deals.
Rising energy prices across Europe have prompted countries to look for solutions ahead of winter.
The Spanish government has intervened to provide a short-term relief package for customers who now face the record rises in the household electricity bills. Rahul Pathak reports.
Winter is coming and the debate on energy prices has taken centre stage. Spanish consumers have been particularly hard hit. The country has the 6th highest GDP in Europe, but recent record rises in energy prices have meant consumers are now facing some of the highest rates on the continent. Pedro Sanchez's left-wing coalition has decided to intervene. Over the next 6 months, they intend to transfer just over $3 billion from the energy sector back to consumers. It'll be done through a mixture of price caps and tax relief on bills. It's an issue that is not just affecting Spain.
We want a European debate, and we want to analyse the causes of the current price fluctuations, as well as elements of the current law regarding price setting within the energy markets that are susceptible and could be improved by using a European approach.
Now I'm standing outside the headquarters of one of Spain's largest energy companies, Endesa. Now Spain, like Europe, is particularly vulnerable to energy price changes. Now despite investing heavily in renewable energy, it still relies heavily on fossil fuels and imports as much as 60% of its gas from countries like Russia. Now as countries recover from the pandemic, or their economies recover from the pandemic, so does the demand for energy, pushing prices up.
Spain has committed itself to renewable energy and can now supply over 40% of its needs through solar plants and huge wind farms across its country. This helps reduce the need for fossil fuels, although changes in weather patterns such as Storm Philomena can affect supply. Fluctuations in the supply and demand of energy have led experts to call for a different short-term solution.
Many economists are saying that energy taxes should be absolutely neutral in the sense that they should go into the government and then go straight back out as a rebate to families. And of course, our governments rely on the revenues from the energy tax to try to balance their budgets. But that would be another solution. If you had a variable tax that was neutral for the budget, that might help us in moments like this. But of course, we'd have to get there first.
Rising energy prices across the continent could also drive up headline inflation across the Eurozone. That is something all 27 partners will be keen to avoid as they try to bounce back from the pandemic. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
EU energy ministers are meeting in Slovenia to discuss a coordinated response to soaring gas and electricity bills. Member states are at odds over possible price caps to protect customers from rising costs. Italy and Greece are among those pushing for greater state control over the energy industry. Well, let's talk to our correspondent in Brussels, Tony Waterman. Hello to you, Tony. So what are we expecting from ministers?
Well, Robin, we just were listening to the press conference here. This was something that was talked about quite extensively during this day-long meeting. And we have to keep in mind here that electricity and gas, these are market goods. So governments have quite limited tools when it comes to intervening in the market. Where they can step in, though, is when it comes to things that are less regulated or regulated in a different way. And this is where the Commission gave some guidance today, although I have to say it wasn't exactly groundbreaking, the type of things that they were proposing. One of those things, of course, course, being on the VATs, on these energy taxes, saying that governments can step in there. Of course, we know, we just heard from Rahul, this is something that Spain is doing right now, slashing energy taxes, also saying that member states are free to start subsidizing vulnerable populations. And this is something that France is doing, giving out $120 energy vouchers to poorer households. Wasn't much discussion, though, at least from the commissioner during this press conference, about these price caps and also these ideas of stepping in and taking some of the profits, the windfall profits that these energy companies are experiencing. The Commission did say that in the coming weeks it is going to put forward a structured toolbox that member states can use so they don't breach EU rules, but also that they keep in mind the bloc's overall energy goals, becoming climate neutral by 2050. These are mostly short-term measures. What is really needed is a long-term solution, some of them suggesting, some of these energy ministers suggesting that there needs to be a break from Europe's dependency on imported energy. Take a listen to what the Irish energy minister had to say earlier.
As gas prices spike internationally, we need international efforts to help protect our people, make sure that fuel poverty and our climate emission targets are achieved at the same time, protecting against fuel poverty. The measures we're going to agree here today, the Fit for 55 package, are the exact measures we need to protect ourselves against this rise in fossil fuel prices.
So, Tony, what impact could a continued rise in prices have for the EU, both in terms of the economic recovery plans and on targets for renewables?
Yeah, I mean, economies run on energy. So if prices are going up for consumers, for businesses, for industry, for governments, that means that costs are getting more expensive. And the concern is that that is going to directly impact not only inflation, but also discretionary spending for consumers, their purchasing power, how much money they can spend out in the other parts of the economy that desperately need this money right now, the restaurants, the tourism industry, the retail shops. And that is really the big concern, which is why you have seen these governments move quite quickly when it comes to intervening in this market. Now, there's a little bit of debate about what this is going to mean when it comes to Europe's green transition. There's some saying that if companies start swooping in and directly targeting companies' profits, that this is going to undermine investor confidence. These companies aren't going to want to spend the millions of dollars to make that transition from fossil fuels to greener alternatives. But it also could help these governments or push these governments to double down on their green investments. And that is certainly the direction that the Commission would like to see member states take. This is going to be a hot topic of discussion when the EU leaders meet next month, for sure.
Tony, good to talk to you. Tony Waterman there in Brussels.
The Chinese real estate giant Evergrande says it struck a deal with lenders over a forthcoming debt payment. The property arm of Evergrande has to pay $35 million on a 5-year domestic bond on Thursday. It now says it's resolved the issue after private negotiations, but investors are continuing to raise concerns over the long-term health of the company, with a second, much bigger interest payment to foreign investors due on the same day.
The French government has unveiled its 2022 budget, which includes tax cuts and unprecedented pandemic recovery spending. Critics have accused President Emmanuel Macron's government of already spending over $150 billion since the pandemic. The budget comes 7 months before a presidential election.
China's tourism bosses have reported a strong recovery in spending during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Over 88 million trips were made over the 3-day holiday. Tourism revenue stood at $5.7 billion, around 80% of pre-pandemic levels.
EU antitrust regulators received a boost from Europe's second highest court as it upheld a record fine against French telecom company Altice for acting before getting approval on its bid for PT Portugal. Altice's fine was the biggest the European Commission has imposed to date for such an offence and totalled $146.7 million. The Luxembourg-based General Court reduced the fine by over $7 million but did not cancel it.
President Manger is aiming to hire 3,000 staff in the UK by the end of 2023 after cutting the same number of jobs last year. The British coffee and sandwich chain says it hopes to double in size within 5 years, targeting areas away from city centres. It plans to open 200 new shops over the next 2 years and expand into 5 overseas markets. It's being described as an assassination attempt. A hail of bullets hit a car carrying a senior aide to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The aide was unharmed, but the police say his driver was injured in the attack near a village outside the capital. Zelensky said the shooting may have been intended as a message. Well, our correspondent Stuart Smith is watching the story from Moscow for us. Stuart, the head of Zelensky's political party says Russia's involvement cannot be ruled out. Why would Moscow target him?
Yes, Ukraine's interior minister then backpedaled slightly, calmed things down a bit by saying that it is probably at this stage too early to suggest that Russia may be behind such an attack. But indeed, the head of the party said that it's possible because of anti-Russian rhetoric in Ukraine has recently been on the rise. That could be one possible reason. The Ukrainian police are looking at it, though, as only one possible reason. They're also considering it could be an attack to try and intimidate President Volodymyr Zelensky after he tried to pass organised crime legislation, which has been clearly controversial in Ukraine. The Interior Minister said, though, that he will not be intimidated, and the reforms that have been launched, including the ones that target organised crime, will be continued. This is what the President said earlier today.
Who is behind this? Frankly, I don't know. It could be internal, maybe external. Saying hello to me with shots from the forest at my friend's car is a weak thing to do, but the response will be strong.
Stuart, has the Kremlin responded?
Yes, it has. On behalf of President Vladimir Putin, Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov rubbished the claim. He said that it was a result of overly exalted emotional state in Ukraine over the assassination attempt. It has nothing to do, in his words, with the real state of affairs. And he mentioned or added on at the end of the press conference that, according to him, no matter what happens in Ukraine, Kiev always tries to find a Russian trace.
Stuart Smith in Moscow, thank you very much.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Germany decides. The election is just days away now after a campaign full of twists and turns.
The EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens. 4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Roger, radio loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very busy when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN. Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories: no new coal power stations or mines abroad, and more vaccine donations. China's president speaks at the United Nations General Assembly.
Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson talks up the prospect of a trade deal with the United States, but Biden plays down the chances of an agreement.
And Europe's spiralling gas bill. EU ministers meet in Slovenia to discuss the growing energy crisis. It's just 4 days to go until Germany's general election, after a campaign full of twists and turns. After 16 years under Angela Merkel, the polls are now so close that unusually there are 3 contenders with a realistic chance of succeeding her as Germany's next chancellor. The early frontrunner was Armin Laschet, the continuity candidate of his ally Merkel's party, the CDU, and its CSU partner. But the two clashed over pandemic policy in March, when Laschet loosened lockdown restrictions in North Rhine-Westphalia, where he is state premier. His ratings have slid over the course of the campaign, striking a low note when he was filmed laughing during a visit to a flood-hit community. Social Democrat Party candidate Olaf Scholz is doing better than expected. The most experienced candidate, polls suggest he would win a straight vote for Chancellor. As Vice-Chancellor and Finance Minister in the outgoing coalition, he could get credit for Germany's pandemic relief package. A business-friendly former Labour lawyer, his election would mark a turn to the left for Germany, but not a radical one. As the youngest of the three and not in government, Annalena Baerbock promises change. After winning the Green nomination in April, she briefly topped the polls before slipping back. Baerbock grew up in the environmentalist movement, going on anti-nuclear protests with her parents in the 1980s. The increasing focus on climate change plays to her strengths. But she's also the least experienced and has struggled to deal with media accusations of plagiarism and exaggerating her resume. Whoever wins is likely to need the support of at least one of the others to govern, so even the losers may have a major role to play in the next coalition.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Ryan Thompson, who's in Frankfurt. So, Ryan, how important could these final days before Sunday's election be for the candidates?
They're super important because, according to a recent poll done by Frankfurt's hometown paper, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, on Sunday, 4 in 10 people who are planning to vote have not yet decided who they want. That's nearly half of all eligible voters, if the poll is to be believed, and that could have a major impact on the data that we're looking at currently and some of the projections that we're taking. The question is, what are the sentiment of these voters? Do they want to continue on the current course? Then perhaps they will continue with the Christian Democrats in supporting Armin Laschet. Maybe they want a little bit of change and they will go for the Social Democrats and Olaf Scholz. Or maybe they want a radically different direction and they will go farther to the left than the SPD and vote for Annalena Baerbock. We will have to see. But we did see Armin Laschet on the campaign trail last night with Germany's current Chancellor, Angela Merkel. She is really trying to use her star power to bring him up in the polls because, as Jamie just mentioned there, he has really struggled in recent months to be likable. He is not as likable as Chancellor Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel really drove home the message that the economy is in a good position now. It has grown dramatically under her 4 terms, and that he would continue that direction that Germany wants to go in. The question is whether voters will want to continue that with Armin Laschet, and according to polling, it just doesn't look like it so far. 22% of voters say they plan to support the CDU and Armin Laschet, but that is 4 points down from the SPD and Olaf Scholz.
Ryan, those polls suggest that the Social Democrats are now leading, but the gap does seem to be narrowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look back. At the end of July, it was the CDU who was dramatically in the lead by many, many points. Nearly 29% of voters said they plan to support the party of Merkel. The SPD, in fact, was way, way down at about 15%. We've seen a complete change of order since then. We've seen the CDU drop in the polls, the Greens drop in the polls from second place to now third place, and the SPD now in a very, very comfortable lead. The CDU, of course, took a nosedive at one point at the beginning of the month of September after a very, very strong summer. They were down to 20%. We have seen a slight uptick in the recent weeks, but the question is whether that uptick will continue as we get closer to Election Day and whether Armin Laschet will be able to pull out a surprise victory.
Brian Thompson in Frankfurt, thank you.
Well, the German government's handling of coronavirus and how a new government will approach the pandemic is expected to have a substantial influence on voters.
While the country fights a fourth wave of infections, Natalie Carney looks at how Germans have responded to pandemic measures over the past 20 months.
In comparison to other EU nations, Germany fared rather well throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. A fast response to the initial outbreak with wide-scale testing allowed Germany's healthcare system to manage rising infection rates. Yet, once the federal and state governments applied restrictions on everyday life in an effort to contain the pandemic, a clear crisis of trust fueled anti-lockdown protests across the country.
It's like living in a police state or under a dictator. It's normally people like that who do this kind of thing.
There is something happening at the national and international government level. It's very worrying. This lockdown, which was introduced 2 months ago, is absolutely not evidence-based.
The government then failed to procure enough vaccines early on, leading to a slow rollout of inoculations. While that has picked up, still only 63% of Germans are fully vaccinated, less than other EU countries. This is partly due to that crisis of trust in the government, which has made vaccinations another dividing issue in society. The introduction of the COVID shot or negative test as a prerequisite for entering restaurants and cultural spaces has only furthered that division. Yet a recent survey shows that 58% of respondents are in favor of stricter rules for the unvaccinated, but most don't want the government to mandate them.
Both the federal and state governments have already agreed to stop paying for COVID-19 tests come October in an effort to push more people to get the jab. The chancellor candidates of both the CDU and the SPD have already said that they will not mandate vaccines. However, the Greens say they will not rule that out.
Over the weekend, Armin Laschet of the Christian Democratic Union, or CDU, reiterated his support of keeping vaccines a matter of personal choice, while the Greens' Annalena Baerbock focused on the need for adults to do more to protect children from the virus.
I think that the unvaccinated should have disadvantages because they had the opportunity to be vaccinated, and the general public cannot always be disadvantaged by a few.
I think you should still leave it to the people because some want to get vaccinated later. I actually do, just to see more studies on how it works.
It is actually a positive thing because the people who are not vaccinated are appropriately to blame, and I think they don't do much for the general public.
The direct impact COVID-19 is having on our lives and the nearly $470 billion being spent to confront it could make the next government's response a deciding factor for some voters when they go to the polls on Sunday. Natalie Carney, CGTN, Munich.
Claudia Pörings is a German financial journalist, and she joins us now on the programme. Thanks very much indeed for being with us today, Claudia. So Germany, like other countries, of course, suffered a big economic shock from the pandemic. Just how bad was it?
Yes, you just mentioned it. Germany had almost 5% deficit in 2020 for the economy, comparable to the unification costs in 1995. We had a very sharp drop in our GDP and then a V-shaped recovery. This year, the new figures are that this year the economy will recover and grow with 2.5%, which the renowned IFO Institute just stated today. The growth is a little bit smaller than expected because we have supply bottlenecks in industry and construction. And the GDP forecast for 21 has been slightly downgraded from 3 to 2.5%, and 2022 will be a better year with a stronger growth, and the rebound will be much better than expected.
So as part of the pandemic response, Germany started a spending spree, basically overriding the so-called debt brake that was brought in to limit public debt. So what's happened to Germany's attitude towards debt?
Well, as you said, the debt brake is it's in our constitution, and the government made only an exemption for the corona years of 2020 and 2021. So the parties rallying for the German election, as you mentioned earlier in the program, all the parties, the Christian Democrats, the Liberal Democrats, the Social Democrats, will stick to the debt brake. And the Greens, they seek to moderate a little bit, to reform it in order to finance climate change projects, and who seek for more investment in those kind of fields.
So just how important an issue is the pandemic response in this upcoming election?
Well, I don't think that the pandemic response will be the major issue for the election. As I mentioned, and you mentioned in your program earlier, which was really giving the audience a broad view about the situation in Germany, I think a big topic in the election is the climate change and the impact of climate change. So, as you mentioned earlier, Armin Laschet and the Christian Democrats, they came from a very good point of 30% of the voters, and they're falling back now to 25%. So it's not the COVID crisis management. It is more other issues which are more important, as I mentioned, the climate change, etc. But it is very interesting how things radically changed. You mentioned earlier that the Social Democrats, who were with 15% in the prognosis, they are now at 27%, the Christian Democrats 25%. So it's a matter of forming coalitions, and a possible outcome would be what we call the so-called traffic light coalition, which means the Red Party, the Greens, and the Yellows, which is the SPD, the Green Party, and the Liberal Democrats. But also possible is if Laschet will really make a strong bound now in these last couple of days, the so-called Jamaica coalition, which would be the Black, the CDU, the Green, and the Liberal Democrats. So I hope, personally, I hope we don't have a worst case scenario, which is a left and green outcome.
Okay, Claudia Perrings, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Experts are warning that lava spewing from a Spanish volcano could cause explosions, trigger landslides and produce clouds of toxic gas. Around 6,000 people have already been forced to leave their homes on La Palma, part of the Spanish Canary Islands. The eruptions are sending lava up to 12 meters high, with the temperature exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius.
The city of Melbourne has suffered one of Australia's largest earthquakes on record, but no serious injuries have been reported. Several buildings were damaged by the magnitude 6 quake, which sent tremors to neighbouring states. Earthquakes are relatively rare in southeastern Australia.
Conditions at camps for Haitian immigrants stranded in Mexico are said to be deteriorating as thousands of people gather at the United States border. Washington and Mexico have been flying people back to Haiti and say flights will continue despite criticism. Migrants have complained of a lack of food, shelter and toilets in the makeshift camps.
The British government says it will recognise a version of the AstraZeneca COVID jab which is manufactured in India. The reversal of travel guidance follows an outcry over an initial decision not to approve Covishield, India's most administered vaccine. It's not yet clear whether double-jabbed travellers from India will now be exempt from quarantine on arrival in the UK. Now to Texas, where a law banning nearly all abortions took effect this month. The legislation also gives anyone the right to sue doctors who perform an outlawed abortion, as well as anyone who helps a woman get one.
The move could have major ramifications for the rest of the United States, as CGTN's Dan Williams now explains.
For the staff at El Paso's Planned Parenthood office, it has been a challenging couple of years. Last March, nearly all abortions were halted in Texas for a month after top state officials, backed by courts, deemed them not medically necessary during the COVID-19 pandemic. Then this month, a new Texas law took effect that bans abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected at about 6 weeks of pregnancy and makes no exceptions for cases of rape or incest. Given most women are not aware they are pregnant at 6 weeks, it amounts to a near total abortion ban, the most restrictive measure in the nation.
Well, for Texas, it means 85% of folks who need an abortion can't access one now without traveling out of state. This law is not going to end the need for abortion. We're not going to eliminate rapists. That's not how these things work.
Xochitl Rodriguez is the philanthropy officer in Texas for Planned Parenthood. She fears the legislation will lead to an increase in risky and unsafe abortion practices.
Forcing people to carry out self-managed abortions is cruel. It's dangerous.
The law, however, does not stop with the abortion ban. It's structured to allow private citizens to sue anyone who defies it, from abortion providers to friends or family members who help patients in any way obtain an abortion after the 6-week mark, and pocket $10,000 if they win. For now, the abortion services centre at this facility remains closed. Instead, the focus is on providing patients with as much support, education and resources as possible. Anti-abortion forces in El Paso see the development as a big win. Mark Seitz is bishop for the Catholic Diocese of El Paso.
Ultimately, abortion really, if you dig deep down, it's not a question of women's rights. It's a question of the right of every human being from the time they begin to be within their mother until the time they die.
Pro-choice activists in the state are angry. So is the Biden administration. The Justice Department has launched a lawsuit against Texas, calling on courts to invalidate the law as unconstitutional. Many more legal challenges are expected as well, as several other states are eyeing similar restrictive moves. The implications of what's happening here in Texas reverberating across the country. Dan Williams, CGTN, El Paso, Texas.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, running racism out of town. Asian Americans take to the roads to raise awareness of hate crime.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The pandemic hit Asian American communities especially hard, with anti-Asian hate crimes increasing dramatically.
In response, a group of young Asian Americans living in New York are raising awareness of the issue by putting on their running shoes. Karina Huber reports.
So they've given us our... Victoria Lowe greets a group of runners in Brooklyn, New York. She's the founder of a new movement called Chinatown Runners. It seeks to increase awareness about discrimination against the Asian American Pacific Islander community through running. The group, that is open to anyone, meets once a month and explores a different Asian American neighborhood at the end of each run.
Perhaps in this group setting, as an introduction to that neighborhood, we will allow you to feel more comfortable in that setting, so that in the future, if you're not running with us, you might just go back and visit because you discovered like a wonderful restaurant or an amazing business.
New York's once bustling Chinatown neighborhoods became ghost towns early in the pandemic, fueled in part by xenophobia. Revenues plummeted at many Asian American businesses, while hate crimes rose dramatically.
One of the more brazen attacks occurred at this intersection in Manhattan's Chinatown in February 2021. A 36-year-old Asian American man was stabbed in the back in broad daylight, mere blocks from the headquarters of the New York Police Department.
That incident turned Lowe into an activist.
It was sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, I was really tired of feeling helpless and scared and sad, and I needed to find an outlet to sort of take back some power and some ownership. And that's really sort of the catalyst that started Chinatown Runners.
The pandemic also motivated Leland Yu, who grew up in Manhattan's Chinatown, to start a runners group. Run for Chinatown has raised tens of thousands of dollars for his neighborhood's businesses. He says it's no surprise that runners are supportive of causes.
We like to say all paces, all races. I think the running community is probably, to me, the most inclusive and loving sport community there is. Since I've entered this world just in the past year.
Runners in Canada and many European cities have organized runs in support of Chinatown Runners, highlighting Asian communities in their own countries. Social media has helped the movement become global.
Even if it sounds a bit naive or optimistic, I think most people are genuinely good. And what we really need to do to build empathy and compassion for each other is to get to know each other. And that's kind of the whole point of Chinatown Runners, is to get to know communities and bridge those cultural gaps.
Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
One of the world's foremost collections of Impressionist and modern art has gone on display in Paris. It's the first time the Morozov collection has been seen outside Russia.
It showcases the art collection built by Russian industrialist brothers Ivan and Mikhail Morozov and features 200 masterpieces from prominent artists such as Monet, Renoir and Van Gogh, alongside Russian masters.
The headlines again: no new coal plants and mines abroad, and more vaccine donations. China's president speaks at the United Nations General Assembly.
Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson talks up the prospects of a trade deal with the United States, but Biden plays down the chances of an agreement.
And Europe's spiralling gas bill. EU ministers meet in Slovenia to discuss the energy crisis.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching. More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Preview. Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.